Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, some of you on the US coast. And welcome and thank you for joining this ISF Bright Talk channel today. My name is Benoit Hendricks. I'm a principal analyst at the ISF, and I'm here with Michael Spencer and Darin Epling from BlueVoyant to discuss the life of a risk operation center analyst. Before I hand over to Michael and Darin, I'll just say a few housekeeping notes to cover off. The presentation will last approximately 45 minutes, and then we'll end a question and answer session. We'll have a question and answer session. Make sure you type any questions in the question box on your system. We'll have time for questions, and I'll come back to ask these questions to Michael and Darin. All viewers are automatically muted by the webinar administrators. If you have any difficulties, the best advice is to restart your computer. And finally, the session will be recorded. It will be available on demand. I'll hand over to Michael and Darin now.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We're really excited to talk about a variety of topics, but as we mentioned at the top, it's really going to focus around what it is like to be a risk operation kind of specialist and analyst within the BlueVoyant environment. And to do that, you really have to understand a couple of things. And to understand that, you have to get the perspective that we have as a company around risk and the way that the market has changed in the last 10 years. We're going to start off with this kind of contextual thing. Then we're both going to go through intros, and then we're going to go through a kind of question and interview to understand what the day in the life is like for the Risk Operations Center. So I'll start with context. Risk has been a pervasive problem along business as long as businesses have existed. And historically, if you look back 50, 30 years, this problem was largely dealt with the kind of third parties that a company was dealing with and questionnaires. Those questionnaires were sent out to third parties. You would hope that they'd answer something truthfully and accurately, and then you'd have to use that to essentially position your strategy, the tactics that you chose to pick a risk appetite and really identify where you needed change. And so that overall philosophy or paradigm really lasted unchanged until the early 2000s, kind of late 2008, 2010s, when we started to identify as a market the fact that there was a variety of information outside of the business, particularly in the cyber perspective, that enabled clients and customers to understand risks for their third parties. This was really the first change in third-party risk, and it gave the paradigm of a risk identification model. This allowed for the overall market to identify many different things across the board for risk at these entities, cyber risk. But it really incentivized the overall market to identify as many things as possible and kind of overwhelm sometimes information. And what it produced was a focus on risk identification and kind of ignored the fact that all of these risks eventually had to be mitigated or remediated. And so what we've done today at BlueVoyant is built an overall end-to-end solution that focuses on risk mitigation rather than risk identification. It's not focused on kind of just checking a box and hoping that compliance measures solve the problem, but really trying to stay left of boom, avoid the issue entirely, and identify areas of problematic vulnerability and risk and threat, and then address them proactively. And do so in an accurate and scalable way. And so that's kind of the context within BlueVoyant has built a solution. And today we're going to talk about kind of what makes that solution so special and kind of leaving behind the old methods of trying to, not really move the needle on risk mitigation and simply identify as many things potentially that could be there, and rather identify the most accurate, the most important, the most timely things to do risk. And to do that, BlueVoyant has really incorporated a variety of things. One, the appropriate data and technology, but really the appropriate talent as well, and kind of marrying all of that into a overall BlueVoyant third-party risk solution. So from there, as we understand that, let's jump into kind of the overall introductions. Perfect. Thank you for pulling up the slides. If we jump one more slide, there we go, perfect. I will start with myself. My name is Mike Spencer. I'm a product manager here at BlueVoyant. My background is in intelligence analysis, primarily using passive data sets to understand networks that you're not allowed to install hardware or software in. And I'm joined today.
I'm Darin Epling. I'm a senior risk analyst here at BlueVoyant. My background is also in the intelligence community, both with the Department of Defense and the Department of State, where I was a language analyst to start off with, and then I kind of transitioned into more of a threat intelligence, network malware analysis role, and found myself here at BlueVoyant, and I couldn't be happier.
Perfect. Thanks, Darin. So we're going to kick it off, Darin, by talking directly about kind of what your job is and what makes the BlueVoyant kind of third-party risk service so special.
So I guess the biggest, the overarching sort of exclamation is that we are a service first, right? We have people behind the data. We have people that are able to reach out to the vendors who have these risks that we have identified and help them work through these problems. Behind that, though, is a very large automated system that allows us to identify the public-facing infrastructure of these companies, identify the risks associated with these public-facing assets in these companies, and we're able to reach out to these customers and help them mitigate these risks. Although our platform is automated, we have highly trained, experienced analysts behind it all, right? Making sure that the data that our analytics does in fact spit out is true, is accurate, and we're able to collate through that data. We're able to confirm that data and make sure that the data that we're looking at is not only customers, but is also the risk that's associated with that.
Absolutely. So what you're describing really sounds like a full solution that incorporates all the data analysis and kind of data analytics with what I think you referred to as the risk operations center.
Sure.
And so that risk operations center sounds kind of similar to a SOC. So what is that risk operations center and kind of what does it include?
So it is similar to a SOC. We have different tiers of analysts from tier 1 to tier 3. Our automation, we have automation that's designed to identify false positives. But at the foundation of everything that we do is what's called the footprinting process, right? And this is where we are able to identify public-facing infrastructure for our clients and our vendors, put that through our automated analysis platform, identify the assets. The analysts then go through and make sure that all the assets are accurate. We weed out, false positives, cloud infrastructure. That's a big thing that takes a lot of experience and insight into, weeding out that dynamic infrastructure that changes on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And really, I guess the risk operations center it's the marriage between the data and the service.
Okay. Yeah. You'd always want to have kind of the computers do what they do best.
Sure.
And then have analysts essentially pick up where the automations leave off.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And so BlueVoyant as a company kind of has a lot of DNA in that.
Sure.
We also run one of the most automated and kind of advanced MSS kind of solutions in market, and do so with very powerful partners and have a lot of lessons learned in that space. And so I guess it makes a lot of sense then to take those lessons learned, take those technologies that have given us advantages in those spaces, and then disrupt other markets by kind of utilizing those advantages and making a solution available for clients that it really takes that full next step to an end-to-end service.
Yeah, and that's never really existed before. I know existing solutions, they have similar processes, but they don't have the people behind it, right? They'll do a similar footprinting process, but it's automated. They'll assign you a score, and that's kind of where they end, and that's where we take off, right?
Yeah.
We're able to talk directly with our vendors, with the security personnel within vendor spaces, and that's all the analysts in the ROC as well. We're not only sitting behind a keyboard, analyzing the data that's coming through and identifying risks. We're notifying our customers personally, and walking them through the steps in order to mitigate those risks.
So that's interesting. That's a kind of change from existing solutions. When you talked about kind of what has been done historically, I think a lot of the competitors in this space have identified things like the vulnerable ports and services and certain vulnerabilities at the perimeter of an entity. But then it's really on their clients to go through and one, kind of verify that those things are true. Two, prioritize the individual vulnerabilities or findings that are most important to the relationship that they have with that vendor. And then third, they actually have to go out and have that conversation with the third party to see if this is true, to validate it in their business model, and then also to plan mitigation. And those three steps are all kind of done by your team. Is that correct?
Yeah, like I said, it starts from the footprinting process. Again, that's the foundation of everything we do. Because if the footprint isn't accurate, then the findings aren't going to be accurate. We also validate the findings. We make sure that all of the data that we have is accurate, and that the vulnerabilities and risks that we're seeing actually do exist. We again validate the attribution of those assets, making sure that it belongs to a company, it belongs to their vendors, it belongs to their subsidiaries or any acquisitions that they may have. And then we go through and we tailor these, we call them escalations, notifications. We tailor them to the specific clients. So if we have a large automaker that wants specific information, they want it formatted correctly for their specific vendors, we can do that for them as well. And then once those escalations go out, typically we get a response from the vendor, and they'll either validate that is their asset and that they do see that risk on their asset, and they'll either mitigate that risk themselves, or they'll come back to us and they'll ask us, how do we do this? How do we do this at scale?
Oh, so there's a kind of consulting aspect to this.
Absolutely.
That you guys also are involved in.
Yeah, and that goes for all of our clients and vendors. We have clients with many vendors.
Yeah.
They're from supply chain to subsidiaries. We work with all of them. And after that conversation happens, they'll come back, they'll tell us, hey, this port is closed, or this server software has been updated, is no longer vulnerable to known exploitations. And we can go through and we can validate that for them. And once that happens, we'll say, hey, this is validated. And we do have a scoring mechanism that sits behind our platform as well, and their risk score will go up. Again, the scoring, I think, is more of a tool to triage, triage the amount of risk and the type of risk that a company has, and allows us to focus our efforts on the most impactful vulnerabilities that exist and remediate those first.
That sounds great. So what you've already described has a lot of similarities or alignment with security operations centers that everyone on the call is probably familiar with. Is the ROC organized in a way that's similar, not only kind of in terms of overall titles and kind of specialties, but also geographically? I mean, companies are always operating in different regions. Is there a geographic distribution for your team?
There is. We have a team in the U.S. Across all time zones in the U.S. actually. Nice. And then we also have a team in the U.K. which handles a majority of our European clients. We also have analysts in Southeast Asia as well. Nice. That we work with, and then we also have a small footprint in South America. So we truly are global.
Yeah,
and
you're spread out.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It makes meetings a little tough to schedule, but we deal with it well.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds great. There's an aspect to this that you're touching on where your team is working directly with the vendors that have identified vulnerabilities, risks, and threats directed towards them. And it's very interpersonal in the sense that if you're that last mile of communication, that team has to be able to do a variety of tasks that can really range from a variety of things. You've talked about how there's multiple levels. What does the kind of average day look like for somebody who's on the more junior side, kind of within this organization that may not have the lengthy kind of background that you do in intelligence analysis and a variety of different environments, but is looking at kind of the more basic tasks?
So like I said before, footprinting is sort of the foundation of everything we do. If we have an inaccurate footprint, then again, the findings are gonna reflect that. Our more junior analysts, typically they come from, a help desk background or a computer science background.
Yeah.
And they start off with footprinting. And that training takes, depending on the analyst, 2 to 3 months to really grasp the concepts and to, provide an accurate footprint.
Yeah.
After that, after a footprint is made, we put them through our analytic, and it will say it spits out findings, and that can be anywhere from open ports, which I think, those are fairly easy to remediate, fairly easy to identify individually, not necessarily at scale, which is, I think, what sets BlueVoyant apart.
Right.
But it's a good task for a junior analyst to sort of learn the flow of the system, learn the skills necessary to interact with our vendors and our clients.
Shadow, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. So we really, I think something that's cool about BlueVoyant is we really do focus on bringing in people right out of college, people wanting to get into the security industry, and providing them plenty of training to get a foot in the industry, and hopefully they stay on with BlueVoyant and excel, and they're able to help mitigate risks across the globe.
Absolutely. Really grow up within an organization to do that. So you've touched on that on the other end of the spectrum,
right?
Those more high-end kind of analysts that are looking at maybe emerging threats and kind of dealing with cases that have exceeded your tier 1 and tier 2.
Mm-hmm.
What are they doing? I mean, if I'm taking my SOC mindset and looking at those type of analysts, how does that translate to external data, this passive collection?
So there are, a lot of vulnerabilities that we can see from the public-facing infrastructure, and I think a huge part of that is state-sponsored exploitations that target these vulnerabilities, and you see 0 days coming out all the time.
Yeah.
So it is important to have somebody with that background and with that training to be able to be able to understand the 0 days that come out. 2, understand where on the internet we can identify those vulnerabilities for our vendors. 3, how to integrate that into our system, right?
Yeah.
If we can't see it within our data set, then it really doesn't mean anything, right?
Yeah.
So we have our T3 analysts, they build signatures, they create analytics that allow those emerging vulnerabilities, as we call them, to bubble up, and we actually create findings and escalations based on those. And typically with emerging vulnerabilities, 0 days, we get those notifications out to the clients within 24 hours.
Wow. So it's really like a race condition.
Absolutely.
Almost, where those vulnerabilities come out, and it's those T3 analysts versus adversaries.
Sure.
And who can then kind of escalate and identify and operate on these things. The biggest difference being our analysts are there to notify those who are vulnerable and then tell them how to fix it, rather than exploit it.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. So it's really an external adversarial eye that's there to help.
Right. And a lot of our senior analysts do come from red team backgrounds as well. So they know how to get into these systems. They know what the low hanging fruit is, what's going to be the biggest bang for their buck, as a red teamer, but also as a state sponsored actor, or somebody doing hacking for profit or something like that.
So they've those high level analysts, and kind of a benefit of this ROC team, it sounds like, is that you get that perspective across your third party ecosystem. It's not just about your own perimeter anymore.
Right.
It's about understanding those risks and mitigating those risks in that race condition. You said 24 hours is kind of that typical time?
That's the goal, and I think that we do a really good job of making it 24 hours. And one advantage to having analysts spread out throughout the country or throughout the globe is that it doesn't matter when those vulnerabilities, when those 0 days come out, we have somebody that's there to give us a heads up. We have somebody that's there to build these signatures. We have somebody that's there to make sure that we're able to observe these vulnerabilities in our data.
Wow, that's very cool. And it does show that whole spectrum of, a junior analyst right out of college, just trying to soak as much up as they can, all the way up to advanced threat researchers who, have spent an entire career, and then everything in between.
Right.
That's a lot. So when you're looking at ROC analysts, what are the kind of characteristics or qualities that you could really look for, or that the clients of BlueVoyant get as an extension of their team?
So, our analysts come from a variety of backgrounds, right? Like I said, we have people that have been in the private sector their whole careers, that have been working security for Fortune 500 companies. We have a good proportion of our analysts that come from government spaces, from the intelligence community, that have worked, language analysis, that are intimately familiar with these state-sponsored actors around the world.
By chance, do you have any language experience?
I do. I was a trained Chinese linguist, actually.
Yeah.
So no, that was that, and that really did help me transition well into this field. Of course, you have the big three state-sponsored actors that everybody knows of, and it really did allow me to sort of get into the mindset of these state-sponsored actors, right? And really what their goals are, what they're targeting, different industries, different governments.
GDPs and
sure, exactly. Yeah.
So that's a diverse team, it sounds like.
Oh, for sure. And we have people from finance who have worked security in the financial industry as well. And that's a whole, although essentially, or in general, it's the same, right? It's cybersecurity. There are different TTPs to target the financial sector as there are to target the manufacturing sector, the government sector.
And I imagine that as your team is that kind of last mile of communication, where they're not only just kind of identifying something and throwing it over a wall, but rather working collaboratively with a company to fix it, understanding an industry and understanding what their values are, understanding the way they're approaching problems, can really dramatically shorten that conversation and make it much more effective.
Absolutely. And we're never there to point fingers. We're never there to tell a client or a vendor, hey, your network is awful, right?
Yeah.
We're there to help them and to help them work through these issues so that in the end they have a more secure network.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important thing to bring up, because so many people in this space, in kind of understanding cybersecurity, can often feel blamed when any vulnerability is found, and that's part of life. It's going to happen. It's really just best to be able to find it quickly, identify what the path forward is, and then validate that the mitigation has been effective.
Right.
And I think that does your team play a role in terms of validating things after you kind of work with a company to mitigate a problem?
Yeah, absolutely. We have tools that we use to validate, server software updates, ports being closed, and again, I think you can do that on a very small scale.
Yeah.
I don't want to say easily. It takes a certain skill set.
Yeah.
But BlueVoyant's able to do it at scale across millions of IPs across the internet.
Wow. And so that must involve a lot of different capabilities.
Yeah.
It has to have a lot of different tools. What are some of the general categories of tools that you guys are using? I imagine, like a security operations center, they're kind of organized in a central system, but there must be a variety of things that you have to then integrate into that.
Yeah, so we integrate a lot of the common threat intelligence tools. We have a threat intelligence team as well that produces reports for BlueVoyant and for our customers. We have skilled network analysts and network tools. We have data scientists on the team as well, which they're a huge help. They help make sense out of chaos, if you will, right? We have the normal sort of workflow SOAR platforms that a SOC would typically have, and then our footprinting tools. Those are all built in the house.
Nice.
And that, again, and I keep saying this is the foundation of everything we do, but it truly is awesome to have a team of highly skilled engineers and developers to create and evolve that tool to our needs.
Yeah, no, and I can imagine that if your system is essentially designed to mitigate risk rather than simply identify it, the demand for accuracy is so much higher, because then the tools you guys are using and integrating and working in collaboration with each other, you guys don't have time to chase false positives endlessly.
Right.
And so the kind of cost to having an inaccurate result is much higher.
Absolutely. I mean, not only is the cost higher, but you lose the trust and confidence of your client, right?
Oh, absolutely. And you don't. It's hard to build that back.
Right. Absolutely. So.
No, that's fantastic. And so when working with both your clients and kind of the third parties, what's that like?
So it depends on the client,
Yeah.
and it depends on the vendor, right? And also depends on the finding type. You know, there are vulnerabilities and findings that we have the capability of identifying that are easily fixed. They're easily remediated. So these are pretty easy. Hey, you know, your RDP port's open. It's probably not a good idea. And like I said before, we're not here to point fingers and say, hey, you know, you should know better.
Yeah.
No, we're here to help make your network more secure, right?
Yeah.
In addition to that, we provide all the information necessary to remediate that, and that's everything. You know, if you have a vulnerable server or a server software that isn't updated, we'll provide you with you know what version it needs to be on, where you can get this version. We'll provide you with information regarding the vulnerability and why it's important to make sure that your systems are updated, because this threat actor is targeting this tool has been targeting this.
Absolutely. It sounds like you guys are incorporating that first step that many companies have gotten, where they, you know, they'll receive a report from someone that says, you know, oh, you have a very poor rating in this type of hygiene,
right?
And then that's it.
Right.
It may have some infrastructure associated with it, but there's nothing left for them to do other than, you know, start to Google things and try to figure out what the next steps is. You guys are performing that for them.
Yeah, it's all laid out. In every escalation, we provide them as much information as possible to not only confirm that their asset is there and that the vulnerability exists, but the information they need to remediate that as well.
So are there clients that you work with who don't want you to go talk to those companies, that maybe want the information that you are identifying, those vulnerabilities that you've contextualized and verified, sure, and kind of given a remediation step for, that they want to have to go to them instead of the third party?
Yeah, and we can do that in a couple of ways, right? We have email notifications, which are written by the analysts themselves, and they go out to the clients, and they'll forward those on to their vendors, and they'll kind of take that mid role where they're the liaison between the two organizations.
Yeah.
We also have a portal, a BlueVoyant portal, where the client can go on there and they can, you know, they have dashboards, they have, you know, all of their information there available to them. And we'll give them messages through the portal where, hey, you know, similar to the escalation, this is what's vulnerable, this is how you fix it, and they can forward that information onto their vendors and their supply chain as well.
Perfect. So it sounds like there's really a hybrid approach where a company can allow your team to go directly to the vendors. Right. Maybe some of their vendors they want that way. Maybe some of the vendors they want to handle themselves because of an important relationship they have.
Right. And we can we tailor every single escalation, every single client and vendor interaction to that client and to that vendor. So it's highly configurable from the client and vendor point of view.
You guys are really just an extension of their team.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So, you know, what was the biggest lessons that you've learned really standing up this team kind of over the last couple of years, looking at the problems that you solved and approaching the industry in a way that no one has done so far?
So I guess biggest lesson learned is you can, you know, some of the people in similar spaces is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink, right?
Yeah.
So you know some of the other companies in the space, you know, they provide a risk score, they provide a generalized, this is your vulnerability, but they don't have that person to provide the service that's necessary to really mitigate those risks.
Yeah, to operationalize that.
Exactly. And I think that's the biggest advantage I think BlueVoyant has over everybody else, is we do have that personal touch, right? We have the people, the experience, and the technology behind the scenes that helps them actually mitigate that risk.
And that, you know, that added accuracy of having an analyst curate everything that has kind of gone out the door, that's going into the hands of somebody, really builds trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I imagine that trust kind of accelerates a lot of the mitigation, therefore reducing the risk.
Right.
Yeah.
I think something else that we do that sets us apart is with these emerging vulnerabilities, these 0 days that come out. Yes, not only do we identify, you know, the assets that have been affected by these 0 days, at least that we can observe, right, for our vendors, but we can also take those and turn them into additional findings, right? So with the Log4j, we were able to do that. There's other, you know, vulnerable to serve you findings that we have created from emerging vulnerabilities that we sent out within those 24 hours to all of our clients.
Yeah. So, you know, as those vulnerabilities are announced, they're kind of incorporated into the the library of things that your
Exactly.
team is working on anyway.
Yep.
So that's pretty impressive. And I think that that ability to execute on changing kind of threat landscapes has to be a huge game changer for a lot of the clients.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where do you see the Risk Operations Center really going in the future? Where are the areas of change?
That's a really good question. I would say more automation.
Yeah.
I would say more automation, and machine learning and AI. I know that's a buzzword and everybody hears that, right? But I really do think that that's where this is coming, because you can take, disparate pieces of data, right? And perform like a behavior analysis on it, right? So you've got this open port, you've got this vulnerable server, you're in this type of industry, which has certain actors that are known to target that. And you can, create, maybe create a finding that says, hey, you're incredibly vulnerable to this type of attack because of these behavioral factors.
Now you're building a story there. It's
absolutely.
The fact that you're taking the understanding in a way. It sounds like it's a lot of the experience that an analyst like yourself has,
right,
and getting it into the machine.
Right. We can contextualize that.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that makes a lot of sense, and it also makes sense as to why to have that kind of competitive advantage, to have the learning data sets, the teaching data sets that you would use for AI and ML.
Yep.
You'd want to have a full end-to-end system where that kind of algorithm can look at all the way from collection through analysis to human actions.
Exactly.
And that kind of full trend analysis is where that can really take place, which is an exciting place to be.
It is.
To look at that changing and making an impact. I know you've talked about kind of how footprinting was the foundation of so much of what we do. And I know that there is a significant amount of that AI ML involved in the footprinting kind of scoring algorithms.
There is, and it it's constantly learning, right? We're constantly training the model. Like I said before, these assets for these companies are as time goes on, they're more dynamic. They're moving to these cloud platforms.
Yeah.
And so these footprints are refreshed on a regular basis, right? So we're always having the most current and relevant data associated with those footprints. And again, that's going to train that model again and again and again.
Yeah, and that really enables scale. From my understanding, BlueVoyant is really monitoring, well more than 1 million companies every single day.
Oh yeah.
And all of those different data points are being refreshed, not only in kind of just identifying ports and services that are open, but really generally, the attack surface, the new infrastructure being stood up and dropped off, and kind of as companies have mergers, acquisitions, divestments, any number of things that can kind of be involved in the natural ebb and flow of a business is going to also be reflected in changes in network infrastructure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, that sounds great. Across a variety of things, it sounds like the Risk Operations Center really is a game changer for a lot of our clients and a lot of the companies that you're working with, to change the way that they're looking at risk and the way that they're actively mitigating risk rather than simply identifying.
And I think that's the key there is the mitigation point, right?
Yeah.
You can like, again, you can have these companies, these solutions that identify the risk, but they're not there behind their data telling you how to mitigate these. And we have received very, very positive feedback from our clients that, like you said, we're an extension of them.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like the team has found itself in a good spot. It's made a lot of progress in identifying the way to solve this problem, but it also sounds like the future is one that's pretty exciting.
It is exciting, and I think we're doing something that nobody's done before, and it's very exciting to be sort of at the ground level of it. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. That's cool. So thank you for kind of walking us through that. I think let's take a moment and see if there are any questions coming in from the audience.
Well, thank you very much, guys. That was very informative, very useful to learn more about the ROC. Well, let's go into the questions. You can still type questions in the question box. I can see a few coming in. Let's start. Is the Risk Operations Center better suited for private or public sector organizations?
I would say we're situated in a good place to solve both problems, really. a lot of us come from government spaces, and we know the industry very well. We have contacts within the government industry as well. So I think we're positioned very well in both the private and public sector.
Yeah, and I guess at the end of the day, both are on the internet. Both are organizations that have assets, be it domains and IPs that are configured and available for routing and any number of interactions. And when you're taking that adversarial perspective of, what would an attacker do, and then identify the highest priority findings, and then start to identify mitigation plans for those, it doesn't matter exactly who it belongs to. No. I think that the overall process is designed well to solve problems for both.
Yeah.
Thanks. So both sides, yeah. What is the next question? What is the typical response rate from the vendors when you need to contact them?
Response rate?
Yeah, I think that our response rate is in the high 80s to 90% response rate. Very often the remainder is not a response rate that never comes, but rather a delayed response. And I think it boils down to what Darin touched on earlier in terms of the attitude of the risk operations center and how they handle that messaging. Historically, a lot of solutions in this space have driven remediation efforts in an effort they could via fear and kind of finger pointing. Oftentimes companies would get a PDF report that said, you're doing very poorly. You've got terrible things, flashing red lights. This is all bad. And that really left a bad taste in the mouth of a lot of different entities. And so we're not here to do that. We're here to identify the handful of individual cybersecurity risks and vulnerabilities that need to be addressed with the following remediation plans. And so what we found is that by tailoring our message, that our overall response rates, which is really just that first step of the mitigation rate, which is what we're really hoping to measure and change, are really positive.
Yeah.
We have a lot of interactions with companies where after introducing ourselves and after they figure out exactly the data that we're able to provide, have not only been excited about mitigating those problems, but also then have asked if they can have the service and kind of work through that, because our clients are using us to talk to their third parties, and those third parties have third parties.
Right, and I think that's something that I was going to speak to. I think that for the most part, we have a very good relationship with our clients and with our third parties, and from the inception of the service with their companies, we're communicating with them, we're building that trust, and along with that trust comes a better response rate and a better remediation rate as well.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's about building trust. It's about being transparent, being honest, and not trying to manipulate anyone involved.
Yeah.
Thank you for your answer. So quite a good response rate then. How does the ROC keep up with the changing attack surface of third parties you monitor?
So again, that's the footprinting process, right? And we touched on that a little bit earlier, where these footprints we'll call it a refresh, but really it's based on the dynamic nature of the internet, right? Yeah. Infrastructure is always changing. Cloud assets are always changing.
Absolutely.
So being able to identify those and feed that back, we have that constant feedback loop with the footprinting process to feed that machine learning algorithm. And again, that's done on a regular basis. So we're very confident that every organization that we footprint has a current and valid footprint.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll expand on that in the sense that our footprinting capabilities take into account dozens of data sources and many different strategies that we run simultaneously on every footprint. And the advantage of doing that is that we can actually build environments, sandboxes, data lakes, any number of kind of names that you want to use for them that compete against one another. And then you run those results against that. And so as these companies are constantly changing, we'll have strategies. And one strategy may say, oh, I think this name server belongs to this company. Another strategy will say, I wouldn't include that. And these two strategies can kind of fight it off until there's an overall winner in terms of score. And then the benefit of this is that Darin's team has analysts who will then review all of the output of these competing strategies, and then say, oh, that was actually correct. This strategy won, and then that strategy gets additional weight for the additional kind of overall confidence scoring. And when you do that iteratively, thousands, millions of times across many different organizations, you start to identify trends. And that's really the intellectual property that allows that footprinting process to keep up with that. It's a combination of having the right data sets. You have to have everything, your classic WHOIS data sets, your classic scanning certificate information. But you have to have that paired with very detailed firmographic and technographic information associated with organizations, passive collection in terms of DNS, any number of other things. Like I said, dozens of data sets.
Yep.
And then have the analytics to work on it and humans to verify it.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you. I can see one more questions. I'll just remind the audience, we still got a little bit of time for more questions and answers from Darin and Michael. So the last question I have so far is on the zero-day vulnerabilities. So how does a ROC keep up to date with the latest emerging threats like zero-day vulnerabilities?
So like I said, we have our own threat intelligence and threat research team here with BlueVoyant, and we work intimately with them as well. And not only that, but a bunch of the analysts that are in the ROC come from a threat intelligence background as well. So we're aware of the identification and reporting processes that is behind the 0 day. And I hate using that term because a 0 day isn't a 0 day when you know about it. But we're very familiar with the process. We're familiar with the trusted sources that we've been able to identify. We're familiar with government organizations that also identify those and put detailed reports out, which allow us to comb that or to push that up against our data, create signatures, and notify our clients in a timely manner.
Yeah, I think that another thing that adds to our capabilities in this space is a lot of pre-compute. In the sense that we are very often pre-computing as many different service dependencies, both software and hardware, at a company, across 70 different categories, everything from the IP firewalls that individuals are running to cameras, to routers, to kind of different dependencies across the board. And when you can catalog and build a library associated with all the observed kind of packages at a actual kind of patch level when available, then when there are vulnerabilities that are announced, as you said, the threat intelligence team and the analysts are constantly kind of have an ear to the ground to pick up those new alerts. They can just run a signature that's against something that's already computed.
Yep.
And so in doing so, that response rate is lightning fast, rather than having to build a new fingerprint and kind of signature for what that would be. Very nice. Also a very good question.
I know. We had some very interesting questions. I don't see any more coming. I think we're going to wrap up. And like we said, we wanted to keep this for 45 minutes. I'll let you say a few final words, if you want, before I wrap up the session.
That sounds good. I would just want to say thank you.
Yeah,
thanks for joining today. And thanks for taking some time out of your day to kind of figure out where the third-party ecosystem changes are going and kind of what really is required for a program to mitigate risk in the evolving places that we have it today.
Yeah, you said it all. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good day.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Darin. I'll just say a few final words from the ISF side as well. We have more interesting, exciting webinars like this one on. So check on our ISF webinars events for more insightful content. You can visit us at securityforum.org. If you missed anything from this webinar, you can watch it on the recording. The recording will be available. You can mention it to your colleagues. And I hope you enjoyed as much as I did today's session. And you can give us a review on the BrightTalk channel. And thank you for listening and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Benoit.